Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm Paul Elam with A Voice for Men, and I am sitting here this morning for me, and quite sure into the evening, in the UK with Mr. Peter Lloyd. Uh, who is Peter Lloyd, are you asking? Who the hell is Peter Lloyd? Why is Paul talking to him? Well, Peter Lloyd is a journalist and writer that has come out with a new book called Stand By Your Manhood. There is a link in the low bar available on Amazon. And I've read the book, and I want to tell you that I think it is a 21 years after Myth of Male Power, it's the sequel. And I'm not going to get into more than that right now. We're going to explain some more of that, but I do want to say as we start out, highly recommend that if you're involved in the men's movement and you're concerned about men's issues, get this book today and read it. Give yourself a Christmas present early, and experience the part of the transition of that most men go through who become MHRAs and what that internal process is like. No more about that for now. First, I want to say good morning and good afternoon to Mr. Peter Lloyd. You want to say hi to everybody?
Yeah, hi Paul, hi everybody. It's really nice to be here and a very festive London, as you can see.
Oh, yes, I can. And looking good there with the Christmas tree. I'm embarrassed. I don't have mine up yet. Yes, I'm a skeptic, but I celebrate Christmas joyously every year. Um, Listen, let's go back a little bit before we talk about your book, because I've been familiar with your work some time now, and
hmm
as a matter of fact, you've been gracious enough to have us run quite a bit of your work on our pages, and you were the first person that I ever saw use the words in a mainstream online publication, which was, I believe, Mail Online. You
hmm
used the words men's rights activist, and it wasn't followed by jerk or creep. It was actually men's rights from a male positive, men's rights positive perspective. And the first thought I had was, wow, uh, how did he do that? This guy must be some kind of magician. So I want to get to that, but I also want to start with getting to, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what got you into being in this crazy work that we do of writing about the issues that nobody wants to hear about, but somehow making them listen anyway?
Yeah, I have to say, it's a difficult calling. I remember us speaking before and you saying it was a difficult calling, and that was so accurate. It absolutely is. But even as a boy, I mean, I'm 34 now, and even when I was a boy, there was always something that I was engaged with about men. And for me, I would look at the media and I'd look at the world around me, and I'd have all these brilliant men in my life, like my father and my brother-in-laws and my uncles, all really great men. And yet their greatness was never reflected in what I saw. There was always this black hole, and everything I saw about men, the narrative was negative and it was critical and it was offensive and degrading. And even as a boy, I had that kind of connection where I found it frustrating. And when I became a writer, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was just to write about something you're passionate about. And that was the obvious thing for me. I mean, I started off writing about music. My first job in London was I worked at actually Madonna's PR company. I was the writer for her PR company. And then I left there after a couple of years and started doing this, which is very different, a lot less frothy, but much more fulfilling. I mean, I loved that job, but this is great because I'm really writing about something that's real. Uh, and it's funny, it's like, yeah, it's almost like coming out as a men's rights activist is it's a funny term. It's almost like coming out. You dip your toe in the water and see what the reaction is like. And then really what keeps me going is that I've almost tapped into a vein. I mean, you have with A Voice for Men. Most men
And
feel the same way we do.
Yeah, and it is like coming out. It's very much like coming out, like exposing yourself to the world for something that the world does not want to see. I totally empathize what many, many gay men have gone through in making the transition from living their lives in secrecy to being open
Mhm.
about who they really are. I know that I went through that experience. How was it that you were able to do? Because, there are, I mean, certainly with all respect, there were people writing about this stuff and have been for 40 years. And
Mm.
every once in a while, you had somebody like Warren Farrell who broke in a little bit to the mainstream, and then, the intelligentsia would say, how nice, those are very good points, and go on and move about their business. Uh,
Mhm.
but you got the dialogue going in your way, in the same way that A Voice for Men did, into the mainstream. And I'm just wondering, how you managed to make that happen, what sort of obstacles you ran across. But I just, I had submitted articles to many, many places before, and it was like, not even the courtesy of a rejection. Yeah. So
That's the
maybe
way
you're
the
just a
industry
lot better
works, I'm
writer.
afraid.
Maybe you're just a lot better writer than I am, but I felt like I was knocking my head against a brick wall and never got anywhere. How did you manage to do that?
Well, I mean, honestly, Paul, it was the article that never should have been written and never should have been published. I remember pitching it and thinking, this is never going to work. This is never going to happen. They're never going to go for this. And the great thing about the Mail is, well, I mean, I work in the building. I'm based in the building most of the time, so they know me and they trust me. But also, I think they just knew that it was, a, they're brave and they're bold and they take, good journalistic decisions, and they're not afraid of controversy or pushing the envelope, and that was crucial. But I think at the same time, they were just really interested in something that was new and hadn't been heard before. I mean, even though the issues weren't new and what we were saying we've all known about for years, Warren Farrell was talking about them 20 years ago. But for the audience at Mail Online and the journalists and the editors at Mail Online, this was almost like an untapped readership. It was like an issue that no one had really touched on before, so it was fresh material. And for me, that was the crucial thing because I wanted to make this as commercial as possible. I wanted people to be discussing men's issues in a way that was mainstream and commercial, and reached people. So it should never happen, but it did, and it's my editors to thank for that.
And was there any, I mean, I can't imagine there was probably not a terrible amount of backlash. I know that some publications out there, including places like Huffington Post and Good Men Project, have
Mhm.
taken material from MRAs, have printed it, and then there was a feminist backlash, and they took it right back down in fear for their lives and tried to pretend that it never existed in the first
Yeah,
place.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
uh, were you worried about any of that happening when, or it harming you?
Paul, I was either incredibly brave or incredibly naive. Now, I'll let you decide which you think. I think it was naive, really. Um, I just always assumed that it was okay to have maybe slightly, different ideas or to challenge the state or what they say. For me, I didn't have any fear of that. It was only later that I kind of looked at what happened to people like Estevilla and people like that, and I think, crikey, I've dodged some bullets, and I'm not quite sure how I've managed to do it.
Yeah, we
But
may end up having to call you to Teflon Don before this is over with, because I know, for
I,
instance, that Erica Jarvis, a writer for the Toronto Star, did an interview with me and evidently thought
no,
I came across as reasonable. And
well, it was a great piece, wasn't it? And she was vilified for it.
yeah, death threats. And then so the piece comes down, and I don't blame her for doing it. But somehow you've managed to, and I don't want to spark any aluminum foil hat conspiracies that maybe Peter's an agent for the feminist Illuminati, and he's here uh, to supplant the message with something else. One read of his book will tell you otherwise. Well, in fact, you read any of his articles, any of his other work will tell you exactly that he understands the issues. He knows what he's talking about. But it is, I got to say, it's amazed me pretty much that you've been impervious all the way through this. And I take that as a good sign, a good omen for our future, that if you can make it through relatively unscathed, there are other writers who will follow your path and do the same.
Yeah, I can actually almost see that happening now. I mean, in the past year over here, the Telegraph, which is a big newspaper here in the UK, they've only recently launched a men's section, Telegraph Men, which has been incredibly popular in the last few months. And that never existed before. There was never, it was never considered that there was a market for men's issues of whatever scale, size, or shape, because the very presence of a men-only section was seen as exclusive and anti-women.
Yes, yes.
Editors all across were petrified of having anything that was men-specific. You could have women's sections, that was fine, and that is fine, but you couldn't have a symmetrical men's section which covered similar issues for men. I mean, just 2 years ago, that was considered controversial, sexist. Now, people are slowly waking up, and I think it's almost like that gradual thing of how much can I get away with? Can we do a bit more? Can we do a bit more? Can we do a bit more? And it's reaching a critical mass point now. I think it's almost a tipping point.
I agree.
I mean, I predict that in 10 years' time, every newspaper in the country, every news website in the country will have a dedicated men's section. I mean, I really believe that. Even The Guardian.
Yes, and it won't be the what you would expect from men's sections of how to act, think, and feel more like girls. It will be actual men's section, not the feminist version of what men ought to be. And I really believe that's coming too. As a matter of fact, I think it's insane to assume that anything else is anything but inevitable, because this is a truth that has been long waiting to be spoken to the general public, and I don't think the message is going away. And there's a lot of women climbing on board with voicing that message. We're seeing places like Thought Catalog print Janet Bloomfield's articles. And it's happening, folks, right in front of us. And Peter Lloyd is one of the people that is building that foundation for us to move upon, and we're really glad to have him. Let's talk about the book. I'm going to give you a couple of my first impressions, because I'll be honest with you, you would not believe how many manuscripts have been sent my way from people that want to publish books. And with all respect to writers, because writing is difficult. It's arduous work. It is exhausting emotionally often, and but most of them were either not well written or they were a fairly well written regurgitation of the same perspectives that we've had for 40 years. When I read your book, I felt like the first time. My experience, let me back up again. I hate to be cluttered with the way I'm presenting this, but I want people to understand. When I read Warren Farrell's Myth of Male Power, when it came out, I had been walking around for several years knowing that there was something wrong, and I just couldn't articulate it. I just couldn't put my finger on something, and it was something that I felt strongly about, but I just couldn't wrap my head around what the problem was. And I read his book, and I went, aha! That's the problem. I got it. I get it now. And now I'm angry about it. And I know what I'm angry about. When I read your book, it was like reading an instruction manual on here's what I do about it internally. Here, if I were to take this information that Warren Farrell wrote and that enlightened my mind to, and that sort of shaped my consciousness, your book is a helpful transition for, I would believe, especially for newcomers who are familiar with the material, to look and say, how do you want to react to this? What do you want to do? What's the most assertive path toward your taking all this information that can be quite overwhelming when your eyes open to what's going on with men? It can be depressing. It really can. But this Stand By Your Manhood, again, link in the low bar, people, is a tome that directs you on what to do, in my opinion. Do I have this right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I always say it's strange how it's always little things that make big things happen, and I always think it is the little daily decisions that we make that become bigger realities, and it's that whole thing of the personal being political, because that's absolutely that's the bedrock of how men as activists protect themselves and operate, in those daily interactions with women and their employer and the state and their children. So it's absolutely crucial. I mean, it's all very well and good, protesting political parties and all that, but ultimately, the really hard stuff, I say, happens around all the soft furnishings. That's the tricky bit, and that is also crucially the thing that nobody ever tells men what to do. Nobody informs men of how to be wise to modern life and to modern feminism and to the good and the bad parts of that, and also to really what I wanted the book to do was give permission for men to be political and to embrace that feeling, that dignity that they have inside them, which says, I'm sorry, I just cannot accept that I am, not as talented as a woman when it comes to multitasking, or that I'm not as good of a potential parent because I'm male. And I wanted to almost give permission and approval and say it's absolutely right to embrace that, and you should do. And this is how you do it, without any shame, without any fuss, without any apology. And it's practical, and it's just fun and real. And I just wanted to be almost like I wanted to be like a friendly conversation. And hopefully that.
You succeeded in that admirably, and I think it's important to point out too that when I say a book that tells you what to do, it's not a book that tells you what to do. It is a book that offers rational choices about what you want to do. And that is, I think, the most. Men have had plenty of "let me tell you what to do." There's been no shortage of that in the history of men, and we've got feminists doing it now. People of more traditional notions doing it still. Gynocentrism doing it. I mean, the whole culture has fed literally for its entire history on telling men what to do and how to measure up. What this does is present options to men that I believe make a lot of sense. And for me, it was, even as I've become very practiced at being who I want to be regardless of what society tells me, and I still found some internal help by reading this book. So can you tell us a little bit about what happened to get the book started? Well, I mean, there's usually a story behind a book. What's yours?
Yeah. I used to be in-house on a couple of magazines and newspapers here in the UK, and then I went freelance and I was pitching. I wanted to follow the kind of men's issues path, and I was pitching individual articles to magazines and newspapers and things, and I pitched one to Esquire magazine, the men's magazine, on the male contraceptive pill. And they really liked it, and they commissioned me, and I wrote this piece. It's 3,000 words long, and it was really, it was really in depth. I went and interviewed the scientists in Scotland and all these amazing people in the lab. And then at the very last minute, they actually dropped the article. It was due to run, and for some reason, months later, after I'd filed it and they loved it, they dropped the article. I don't know whether it was because it was too political or whether they just went cold on the idea. So I suddenly had this piece of work that I was really proud of, and I really wanted to get out there. And what am I going to do with this? I'm bruised by this magazine experience, and I don't really want to have to pitch it to somebody else. And so I was like, what am I going to do with this? And then a friend of mine who works in publishing said, casually, you should just write a book. So I kind of thought, yeah, I guess maybe I could. And it was as simple as that. It really was. And then I tried a couple of people in the Mail had books, a couple of fellow journalists in the Mail had books published. And I know how hard it is to get a book published. I don't know what it's like in the US and Canada, but here in Britain, it's very hard to get anything published. And these journalists who'd had books printed had given me details of their literary agents and said, contact these people who might be able to help you. All of them said no. All of them said, you'll never be able to write a book about this. A book like this will never be published. Nobody will ever publish it, and nobody will ever buy it. The powers that be won't let this book happen. They'll put up a fight. And then, sure enough, a month later, I met with Ian Dale at Whiteback, who's a brilliant guy, entrepreneur and publisher and politician, and he loved the treatment. He totally understood all the issues around men and boys, and it was that was it. And then he agreed to do it, and we thrashed out a contract. And 6 months later and a few grey hairs, and here we are, the book is done.
Excellent. So all the naysayers did ultimately prove to be wrong, that you could never get it published, that it could never happen. I could have told them that earlier, because if we applied that kind of logic to this, then Peter Lloyd's first articles would have never been run in Mail Online, and A Voice for Men would never have become the successful website that it is. A lot of nevers out there, and I had people when I started out told me, you're out of your mind, you're going to invest your life and your reputation into this, and it'll never go anywhere. And I had men's rights activists telling me that, and my attitude is, watch me. You just keep telling the truth, people will eventually start getting it. I'm curious about, again, like every book has its story, every men's advocate has their story too, their transition. What has this been like for you in terms of your view of yourself and your view of the world, going through and digging through all the research and developing this kind of literature and facing the struggles of getting it published, finally getting it done? Who are you now compared to where you were 5 or 6 years ago?
Oh, I mean, I've changed so much in the last few years, and I really think embracing them, that kind of political aspect of yourself, for men is discouraged, from the offset. That's what chivalry is all, isn't it? Being a gentleman is forsaking yourself for benefit, usually of a woman, and that includes politically and socially as well. And I think for me, embracing that and owning it and being proud of it was, I said earlier, it was almost like, coming out as an MR. It was almost like, what it would be like for a gay man to come out. It's that same ownership of pride and dignity and having boundaries. And I feel more fortified as a man. I feel more well-rounded as a man. And I also now see the scale of the issue. I think it's like anything. You see it from the edges, and you maybe see like, oh yeah, that was an incredibly unfair divorce settlement that John Cleese suffered, or that was really unfortunate that Boris Becker suddenly ended up being a father to some woman who he had sex with in a restaurant. I'm pretty sure that wasn't an accident, but who knows? And you kind of see all these instances in life, and you question them. And for me, doing the book and going through, looking at it from political and a social and a financial side, you realise that, not only is this real, but it's absolutely huge, and it dictates men's lives subconsciously to the point where we are literally dying years earlier. We're going to fight wars for that we don't even believe in, and we're having children with people we don't want to have children with. We are so conditioned to forsake ourselves. It's almost subconscious, and I think for me, raising that and being aware of it just made me more powerful, I think.
The word I use is freedom. That internally, I'm just so much more free to be who I want to be according to my own terms than ever before. Let's see. What for you now? You've got a book out, and it is. I know it's going to end up in the sidebar with the other classics on ABFM, because I think, again, this is critical reading. If you're new to the MHRM, you're aware of the issues, find a way to get a hold of this book. What do you see yourself being now in 5 years? What do you want to do? You've broken new ground. You've done what everybody said was impossible. That's happened. What, do you retire now and go fishing, or do you have another book in mind, or more work as an advocate? What's the plan?
I don't think I'd ever stop doing my kind of advocacy work. My interest in men's rights is real, and it's almost like embedded in my DNA. I don't think I'd ever be divorced from that. I never planned to write this book. I never really planned to write about men's issues. It just happened. And I'm a big believer in just letting that happen and following that path. And who knows where it's going to go. Well, ideally, what I'd love to do in 5 years' time is perhaps be even further in the mainstream with this. So perhaps maybe, I'd love the book to be released properly through a US publisher, and I'd love to kind of become a talking head about men's issues on TV, and really addressing things in more instant terms, face to face with people on TV and on radio, because that's often where some of the some of the greatest battles can be won. And I just think there's so much scope to what's happening in the men's movement, and there's so much urgency to it that we're almost on the precipice of it. I think it's about to happen, and so I just want to be present when it happens, when it does.
I somehow think you will be. Well, I think that about wraps it up for today. I want to remind everybody one last repetitive time, if you're interested in this book, there is a link in the low bar. It's available, I believe, in hardback and Kindle, is it not, Peter?
Yep, it is. And actually, I should just quickly say, somebody pointed out the other week that this is the first ever men's rights book by a UK political publisher. So, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, between us, we've reached another milestone, so that's wonderful.
Folks, we have seen what the British can do with rock and roll. I kid you not. They can do the same with men's rights advocacy. This is, again, it's a really powerful. I see behind me on my book, I've got my bookshelf, there's my copy of Myth and Male Power, there's Robert Bly, there's Sam Keane, there is all sorts of people that have written in one way or the other to these issues over the decades. We finally live in an age where there is no more silencing of our opinion.
Yeah.
It won't be tolerated or allowed anymore, because what do we say at ABFM? We are the media. We're not waiting on them. We create it. And now we have another great addition into the literature for men's human development and for their rights, and courtesy of Mr. Peter Lloyd. And I want to thank you very much for being on this today, and for sharing with our viewers your work. And I wish you the best of luck in this turning into a wild success.
Thank you so much, Paul, and thanks to all the readers for A Voice for Men and everybody who's been supportive so far. It's much appreciated, and I hope you all enjoy the book.
Good night, everybody.